The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to see how many people are joining us today. So we're going to get started. So welcome to everyone. We're really glad that you're joining us. My name is Karia Young Eagle. I'm the Partnerships Manager at Women's Funding Network. I'm delighted to partner with Women Moving Millions, Carol Andreae, and Rosalind Dawson Thompson today. Honestly, it's a very all-star cast that you're about to hear from, so I think you're going to learn a lot from everyone today. And I have Courtney Harvey sitting here right next to me. She's the Executive Director at Women Moving Millions. We're lucky to have her in person, and we encourage any of our members to swing by our office if you're ever in the Bay Area. We love having visitors and getting to know you and catch up. So really quickly, I want to cover a few pieces of housekeeping. First of all, questions, please ask them. We encourage you to submit any questions that pop up just throughout this virtual fireside chat in the question box. It's located on your control panel, which typically sits on the right-hand side of your screen. So take a look for that. Take a look for that now, and just make sure you can find that question box. And if you'd like to ask a question verbally during the Q&A session, just click the little hand icon in your control panel, and I'll be able to unmute you so that you can share your question directly with the panelists. And we just ask that you begin your question with your name and organization that you're affiliated with, so we have a little bit of context. We'll be also live tweeting some of the strategies and the do's and don'ts that are going to be discussed today. So if you're part of the Twitter community and want to follow or contribute to this conversation online, go ahead and follow Women's Funding Network at Women's Funding and Women Moving Millions at WOMMOV Millions. If you didn't catch that the first time, please take a look at our logos up in the right and left-hand corners, and you can see our Twitter handles there. I also wanted to announce that our second and final 1.5-day summit on advancing women and girls' economic security, that's taking place in New York from July 14th to the 15th. And you don't need to be a Women's Funding Network member to join, but it is limited to funders of gender equity. Registration just went live on Monday, and we're expecting it to sell out. So if you'd like more information, please let me know, and I'll be happy to share. One last thing, we'll be sharing this webinar recording in a couple of days, so keep an eye out in your inbox for that, and you're welcome to share this with any friends who might be interested in learning more about this topic. So I'll hand the mic over to Courtney, and she'll give a brief introduction of Women Moving Millions.
Hi, good morning. I am the relatively still new Executive Director for Women Moving Millions. While I'm new to the ED seat, I have been with Women Moving Millions as the Director of Operations for almost 3 years. So this role is really an incredible opportunity for me, and I'm so delighted to work with our incredibly talented team in this new way. For those of you who might know my predecessor, Jess Hussein, you will be happy to hear that she hasn't left us and will still be with us as our new Chief Philanthropy Officer. This is probably a little bit of an unusual move and one that might not work everywhere, but we're really, truly thrilled to continue our partnership in this new way, as she takes on more of our work to engage new women in their philanthropic journey and be a great ambassador for us out in the world. For those of you who might not know us well, we are a community of over 250 members in over 13 countries, all of whom have pledged or given at least $1 million or more directly, not to us or through us, but directly to organizations or initiatives that promote gender equality around the globe. Our mission is pretty simple: to catalyze unprecedented resources for the advancement of women and girls, and our work is really twofold. 1, to inspire more women to give big and bold gifts, and 2, to support the leadership and philanthropic effectiveness of our members. I'm really thrilled today here to be with the WFM team in cloudy San Francisco. And as you know, Women Moving Millions had really started as a Women's Funding Network program in our very early days, with the goal of inspiring new women to give $1 million plus gifts to women's funds under the Women's Funding Network umbrella. When the campaign ended in 2009, our relationship obviously continued, and we now work with women's funds and other nonprofit partners to help them build their relationships with their major donors. One very tangible way we're doing this now is that we open up our annual summit to our nonprofit partners who come as a guest of one of our members or with a prospective Women Moving member who has capacity to give at the $1 million level. We like to think of ourselves as partnering with nonprofits to help them plant the seed of bigger and bolder giving with their donors. And this time, for the first time in our history, we will be in San Francisco this year for our annual summit. And I'm sure my colleagues will follow up with a bit more information on that. Just a brief note, also on the horizon for us is the development of a potentially new campaign, potentially $1 billion campaign, to help provide some of the overhead and marketing power for women's funds and other nonprofits to raise money in the gender equity space. We're also in the process of developing a full philanthropic leadership curriculum for women funders at the highest levels to help them be more strategic, but also to help them be better thinking partners with their grantees, thinking about things like the power dynamics and funding relationships, and having a greater understanding of intersectionality issues like race, gender, and class. We're incredibly delighted to be thinking further with Women's Funding Network these days about ways we can partner more deeply. And I am so excited now that we have a shared board member, Carol, who we'll be talking to in a short time. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Events and Engagement, Chantal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chantal Benito, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement. At Women Moving Millions, as so many of you are aware, we're committed to offering interesting and relevant engagement opportunities as a way to amplify the leadership of our members. All of our programming exists to give our members the chance to share their expertise and learn from each other via various platforms, including online, webinars, and conference calls, as well as in-person gatherings. As Courtney mentioned, we also do work closely with women's funds and other NGO partners, and some of our offerings are open to them as well. The Circles program, as you can see on the slide in front of you, has really taken off this year, which we are very excited about. This program organizes members across specific interest areas to foster deeper learning, collaboration, and opportunities for impact. You'll also see listed that we have 4 active circles right now, including anti-pornography, film, stop traffic, and violence against women and girls. This fall, we're excited to be launching an Impact Investing and Reproductive Health Circle, 2 separate circles. We also have our speaker series webinars, which have been really well attended. And they are a way to connect you, our members, and partners with external experts and thought leaders on of-the-moment topics. Please save the date for our next one, which is open to our members, prospective members, and our fund and NGO partners, hosted by our Film Circle on June 7th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, featuring a new narrative film called The Tale. You'll also see listed a bullet point about our online platforms. Since we're a community with members all over the world, we can't always gather in person. We've come up with some other ways for you to stay engaged with each other and up to date on all things WMM. We've got a private Facebook group that is quite active, our private online member portal on our website, the annual member directory, and more. If you'd like to know how to access any of these platforms, please do let me know. Finally, we're working on building out 2 additional programs, our Writers and Speakers programs. We'll be coming out with more information about these programs over the next coming months. But know that these programs will continue to amplify the voices of our membership as a collective, as well as individually. We are so excited about our annual summit. So as Courtney mentioned, for the first time this year, it will be held at the St. Regis Hotel in San Francisco, California. The dates are September 15th to the 17th, and we do hope to see you there. If any fund or NGO reps or leaders, you're welcome to come and attend. And if you come with a current prospective WMM member, we would really appreciate that. So know that registration for you will open next Thursday on June 2nd. And so with that, thank you so much for your time. And I'd like to turn over to Lisa Anderson, our Director of Strategic Partnerships, who will be interviewing Women Moving Millions member Carol Andreae about her donor experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantal. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Lisa Anderson. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Women Moving Millions. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Carol Andreae, who is not only a member, but is a board member of Women Moving Millions and also of Women's Funding Network, as well as a longtime philanthropist who was a co-founder of the Women's Fund of Central Ohio. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Lisa.
Okay. I know you wanted to start off with some quotations you've collected from donors to kind of set the stage for our discussion here today. So why don't you go ahead with that?
Great. Thank you, Lisa. So I seem to be getting a reputation as somewhat grumpy donor, and I thought that it would be useful for me to not just present my thoughts, but to go out and talk to some other donors about what was important to them. And these are all women, so my understanding, and from what I've read and heard, that men often approach their donations in a different way. So these are quotations all from women, and I've just selected 3 of them that I think capture a common theme. And in all of them, you'll notice that the sense of a relationship is critical. So one person said, "No matter the size of the gift, I want to feel that I will have some impact. It gives me a feeling of empowerment. It must fit into areas I've tried to focus on, particularly ones where I can be a bit involved. Those areas that touch me personally." Another person said, "Miracle Grow will not make me sprout more bills or coins. Cultivate is not a pretty word. Remember, I'm a human being. How about relationship or partnership building instead?" And a third said, "Each donor is unique. You'd better know what we like if there is a large ask. Show some curiosity. What is the relationship that creates a unique partnership? Shift from entitlement to partnership, an exchange of energy. We want to feel connected through your work to the privilege of doing something greater than myself, ourselves."
Those are terrific, terrific quotes. So, Carol, what has motivated you in terms of your philanthropy? You framed kind of the situation for donors. What has most motivated you?
Well, again, I'm going to go back to that. In this case, I really am speaking for myself because everybody's a little bit different. But for me, being involved and touching an issue that I care deeply about, and above all, making a difference, I want to use my resources to help make changes in systems. And back to partnership, I really like to think of it as a partnership. And the organization is doing the work that allows me to use my resources to make a difference. I don't want to be seen as Lady Bountiful. I like being involved in some way beyond money, so that's not always possible, but I do want to sense that I'm joining the work to make a difference.
Absolutely. And what inspired you? Because you have given big and you've given bold. What inspired you to take that step?
Well, for me, I had the good fortune to be one of the founding members of the Women's Fund of Central Ohio. And I had been involved in a Women's Fund in Maine before this. And then when we moved to Columbus, I looked for a Women's Fund and was told that we didn't need one here. But I've had a lifelong interest in women's issues. I went to a all-girls school. I went to Smith, a women's college. I was director of a women's career center. There's a theme building here. And my husband and I were in the process of rewriting our wills. This was about 6 years after we started the Women's Fund here in Columbus. And I was thinking of putting $1 million in my will. And then I attended a workshop which was organized by Helen LaKelly Hunt. And there was a woman there when that Helen was doing an early attempt to get women to give at bigger levels at that point. And there was a woman there who talked about, she had also thought about giving her money through her will. And she said, you know, I want to have fun with my money, and I want to see what happens to it. And presumably, if I'm dead, I won't. So that struck a chord with me, and I thought, well, yeah, I want to have fun with my money too. And so when we went to see our lawyer, I said, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this because I don't know what to leave in my will. I don't know how much I'm going to give during my lifetime. And he said, oh, we can do that. So what has happened for me is that there is $1 million bequest in my will, and as I give during my lifetime towards that million, it gets subtracted. But if I were to get hit by a bus, and I certainly hope I don't, whatever is left comes out of my estate. So it's a really good way, by the way, for those of you who are fundraising and looking for ways to make this possible. Giving $1 million sometimes is a bit overwhelming, and thinking about it in this way for many people, certainly for me, was a great way to be able to give my money and not just be overwhelmed.
That's a really great suggestion. And finally, on this aspect of giving, you did claim your philanthropy. You chose to identify and become public. Just very briefly, can you tell us what convinced you it was important to put your name out there with your giving, and what, if any, impact did it have on your life?
Yes, it was, frankly, a big deal for me to go public. I debated for a long time. I first was going to be anonymous, and then I was going to be anonymous outside of just the Women's Fund board. But I actually had a friend who said to me, I've been a life coach, and she said, you like to work with women around money issues, and what if the same things that are holding you back are holding them back? And by your stepping forward, you can enable others to also step forward. So that was a big gulp for me. I had a lot of strong family taboos about not being public. Also, you know, when I was growing up, philanthropists were all male, and primarily white male. And so for me to step into that, I think that there's a whole thing around money and power, and stepping into that meant that I had to redefine what power meant for me. And I guess the real motivating force was that if I could be public, that I might say, A, this is a really important issue, that women and girls issues need to be paid attention to, and also I could encourage others to step forward into their own ability to give.
And that has worked for you. You've had women thank you for stepping forward, have you not?
I have. And actually one of my favorite stories, which is certainly not at the $1 million level, but I had a woman come up to me shortly after my gift was announced, and she said to me, you've really inspired me, because right now I'm giving $25 a year, which seemed big, and now I'm going to really stretch and give $50 a year. And I am thrilled, because it is about all of us coming together and stepping forward at whatever level we can do. And I do know of some other people who've also stepped into the $1 million role who've said that my coming forward inspired them. So that has been really amazing for me. And somebody said recently that they felt that the gift really transforms the giver almost more than it transforms the organization, and certainly that's been true for me.
That's fabulous. That's really wonderful. And you know, even though it shows you to the power of an individual donor in terms of motivating others, and peer-to-peer we know is very important in terms of donor inspiration. I'd like you to speak a little bit about the importance of the relationship between the donor and the beneficiary, in the sense that I know you've spoken about the importance of the beneficiary taking the time to know the donor's interests and looking at them as a whole person. Can you talk a little bit about some of the side effects that sometimes enter that relationship in terms of expectations on the part of the beneficiary, things like that?
Yeah, with the Miracle Grow quotation, one of the things I really like about that is I think that there is a tendency among people, there's a jargon around fundraising. We use terms like cultivate and the prospect, and I think that it dehumanizes the relationship, and sometimes people start thinking of, I'm going out to have lunch with the prospect, not
right.
with this person. And I think there sometimes is also a tendency to want to, naturally, you're eager to talk about what it is your organization does, but there also needs to be curiosity about the donor and her interests, and to really listen and see where the interests match up, because we're talking about a mutual relationship, and having a respect for the interests of that person and knowing what's important to them, and not attaching a dollar sign to that person.
Right.
And there can be a tendency to have a sense of the person should give this amount. There are assumptions made, or a sense of entitlement. I know that for me, because one of the side effects of having gone public is that somehow people think that, oh, she gave $1 million to the Women's Fund of Central Ohio, she can do that for us. And yeah, it's a problem. And for me, the contrary is true. Because I have given $1 million to the Women's Fund of Central Ohio, I can't give big again. So I sometimes people get, shall we say, confused, or they have expectations that really I'm not going to be able to fulfill.
Right, right. But in fact, that brings us to a really important theme here today, fundraising do's and don'ts. Because in the space of one summer, not too long ago, Carol, you personally experienced some really vivid and practical examples of fundraising do's and don'ts. And
yes,
I'm really grateful for you to sort of talk about those for us. Maybe you could start with the don't, which was vivid.
Actually, even in the first one, I do have a do, but okay. I'm going to put this in context. There was an organization I'm going to call the Society for Wayward Cats. As far as I know, that doesn't exist. So if it does, my apologies, but I don't want to disparage a particular organization, because I think they do good work. I was on their board 25 years ago, and then we moved to another state. We moved to Ohio, and I have continued to be involved very peripherally. I have continued to give, and I'm going to use some real numbers here. I have continued to give about $2,000 a year. So for 20 years, that adds up. Mm-hmm. And I got a note from a board member that I knew slightly 20 years ago. And one of the do's is that she said she wanted to talk about wayward cats with me. And that's a do, because I really, really hate to have somebody, let's get together and have lunch, and then they show up and are ready to make a pitch. Don't do that.
Right.
So they did the do part. She told me that we were going to talk about wayward cats, and I'm not stupid. I can figure out what that means.
Okay.
And I also knew that they were running a capital campaign.
Right. You were back in the state, is that right? At the time,
Yes.
you were in person on vacation, right?
Yes. And so we got together, and the executive director came along too. So I, again, knew what this meant. And I had been thinking ahead of time what I might give. And so we had a nice lunch, and they told me about what the Wayward Cats were doing now. And before they could actually ask me for an amount, I said, okay, I've been thinking about this, and I'm going to give you $10,000. Their faces,
and they were thrilled, right?
Their faces fell.
Oh.
There was a long silence.
Dear.
And I found myself apologizing. It was like, oh, stop. But sort of saying, oh, I have a lot of other commitments. And anyhow, eventually the executive director took a deep breath, and she started talking about what bucket my money might go into in their campaign. And I'm sort of waiting for more of a reaction. Anyhow, lunch finishes. They did pay for lunch. That's a good thing. And as the board member was leaving the restaurant, she called across the room, oh, and Carol, thank you. I was standing beside the executive director, who managed a weak smile and said, oh, yes, thank you, in that tone of voice.
Oh.
Okay, so I'm driving away, and I'm feeling like, okay, first of all, I felt inadequate, which is not a good thing you want your donor to feel. Yeah. And then I'm starting to get steamed. Okay, let's use the real word. I was really starting to get pissed off.
Right.
And I thought, oh, surely by the time I get home and they get back to their respective homes, offices, they will realize that they didn't handle this very well, and I will get an email or a call. And nothing came.
Oh.
And I was there for a month on vacation, and so heard nothing for a month.
Wow.
Got home, and there was a letter, which I checked the postmark out of curiosity. It was mailed about 2 weeks after our lunch. And it said, thank you for participating in our campaign. It was handwritten. That's a good thing. That's good. But it was sort of lukewarm. Thank you for participating in our campaign, and I hope you will continue to give to our annual fund.
Ooh.
So a thank you note and a request for money in the same letter.
This did not leave a great impression on you, did it?
No.
Yeah.
So I, that was it was not a happy experience, and I did not go away feeling good.
No, but then in the same summer you had a very different experience. Tell us about that.
So actually, somebody at Smith College, which is my alma mater,
right,
called Women Moving Millions and asked if they thought somebody might be interested in a program that's called the Steinem Initiative, after Gloria Steinem.
Right.
And the Women Moving Millions very properly asked my permission to have them contact me. And that's something else. Never give out contact information without asking with the person.
Right.
So they did contact me, and it sounded really interesting to me. And I said, well, I need to think about this, but I don't want to get your expectations up. I can probably give in the range of $10,000, maybe $20,000. And they were thrilled, or at least expressed being thrilled. Whatever they were really feeling, they covered it up. No, they were very enthusiastic, very gracious, and it was really nice. And then I immediately got a follow-up email again expressing enthusiasm and thanking me and wondering if there was more information they could give me. So a wonderful follow through. And I started thinking about there was another Smith alum I know who was really interested in this kind of thing. So I contacted her and asked for her permission to have the Smith people contact her. So in this case, I was absolutely willing to share my resources in a way that I never would do with wayward cats at this point. And I think it's a really good example to remember that it isn't just about money. We often have more to offer than money. It can be resources in other ways.
Absolutely, and those are fantastic examples of how, just actually you're talking about consideration for a person who is also the donor, and also simple good manners, which sometimes seem to go by the wayside, as we've spoken before, and as you said, sometimes people are so focused on the fundraising that they forget, that people are involved. So in fact, we're coming to the end of our session, but I wanted to ask you if you have any key takeaways that our audience can take from us here today, something they can use in their work. Is there a message that you would like to give them from your experience?
I guess I want to reiterate that just remember that this person is more than a dollar sign, and she has often many kinds of resources, and time, talent, networks can be equally valuable. And to be appreciative, I mean, it's common good manners. I'm really surprised that I even have to say thank you, because that should be pretty obvious. So be appreciative, even if the person gives nothing in dollars. But if that person takes time to listen, that's important, because it is more than one person who can tell your story, or one more person who can tell your story.
Exactly.
And sometimes I think people get so caught up in the fundraising that they lose track of why they're fundraising, and that the mission is it's important to make the changes. In this case, I'm talking about social change. It's not just about the money, and it's the coming together of many different kinds of resources.
Absolutely.
And money isn't the only way that change happens.
No, clearly, and you've made that point very well in this conversation, that you're bringing a lot of resources beyond your checkbook. A good donor is bringing a lot more than that, and it's really up to the beneficiaries to be aware of that and take advantage of those resources that go beyond the checkbook. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely. And really taking time to build a relationship. It does take time. It's not like you can just go out and say, oh, by the way, here's this wonderful organization, don't you want to give us $1 million? It takes time, and really listening carefully to what it is the person is interested in and how she likes to be approached. Everybody's different. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we like different kinds of things. Take the time to find out what those might be, and even if that person decides to give her money someplace else, encourage that. We want to encourage more women to step into their own philanthropy. And so really listening deeply and taking the time to build a relationship is probably the key element of any fundraising.
That's great advice, and it's something that I think probably a lot of people tend to forget in the heat of the moment and in the fundraising frenzy. So with that, I want to thank you, Carol, so much for being so gracious with your time and with your insights, which really are invaluable. And you gave us a great takeaway piece. And we actually are following you with some words of wisdom from a donor, which is very much along the lines of what you were saying, which is, don't treat me like a dollar bill with sneakers on. I am a human being just like you. So with that, I'm going to say thank you to Carol, and I'm going to turn it back over to Karia Young Eagle. of the Women's Funding Network. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Carol. That was really insightful. I just want to introduce Roz Dawson Thompson quickly. For those of you who don't know her, she's pretty infamous in this space. Roz is the president and CEO of the Dallas Women's Foundation and the board chair of Women's Funding Network. She has a wealth of experience in both local and national philanthropy, and she's a lifelong advocate, as Carol is, for women and girls. Dallas Women's Foundation raises funds from a broad base of donors, and the foundation from that donor base is really able to grant over $2.5 million to women-focused programs and initiatives. Since Roz joined the Dallas Women's Foundation in 2011, the foundation has been able to expand its impact and has unlocked greater resources for women and girls to create more social and economic impact in North Texas and the surrounding areas. And Roz, I'll let you share your expertise and perspective from a women's foundation.
Well, thank you so much, Karia, and I'm so happy to get to join in this wonderful session with the very wonderful Carol, and have the joy of serving with her on the Women's Funding Network board. And Lisa, so nice to talk to you, and to Courtney as well. Great team, and appreciate everything that Women Moving Millions is doing to drive more resources to advance women and girls. There are a few things that Karia asked me to cover, and the first is, thinking about cultivating $1 million donors in general. What is that experience like? And I'd like to start with just a couple of examples which point back so very much to the things that Carol highlighted, and that any kind of relationship that an organization has with a supporter, a donor, is just that, a relationship. And it is not a one-time transaction, and any concept of it as a transaction should be eradicated from your thinking, because you really, truly are attempting to forge a mutually beneficial and very powerful partnership between yourself, your organization, and your donor, at whatever level that donor might be. So let me give you two examples of a couple of really awesome $1 million donors, the first of whom never saw herself as that at all. She was the head of global marketing for a Fortune 10 company, and had achieved tremendous success, and became interested in our organization primarily because we were driving to a strategic impact on women's economic security and women's leadership. And she liked our approach, she liked our metrics, and she liked the fact that we were driving this with some very substantial fundraising up underneath these goals. And her question to me is, what can I do? And rather than say, write a big check, the first thing I said is, help me fashion a network of powerful women like you who can join in this work with us. And so from that became her leadership of a network of C-suite women who embraced this initiative. And when she then asked later, and what should I give? I said, you must give the gift that you feel this work warrants. And by then, her trust in our work product, our goals, our ability to achieve them, and quite frankly, the way she had been treated as an asset and a resource far beyond her capacity to give a gift, she said, I think I will make that gift $1 million. And never had that thought ever been part of her thinking. It was profound to her, it was profound to us, and it set a profound example to all of the other women that she had built through this network, and has helped us lift our grant making from $2.5 million a couple of years ago to over $4 million last year. and so much of that aimed directly at women's economic security and women's leadership. The second is a story of a donor who's an individual donor in a well-known family and well-known philanthropic family in this community who had given broadly through the male side of the family. And yet this wonderful woman had in her own right enormous resources and an enormous drive to do things with them that benefited the memory, or that honored the memory of her mother. Had one not known that key fact about her, then any other questions about her support she would never answer, because the one key reality for her was the money that she inherited through her mother. She wanted to honor the values and the legacy of her mother. And how would we have ever known that? Only by creating a long-term, long-standing, much trusted relationship with this really wonderful woman who, like Carol, first wanted to never put her name on it until being able to honor her mother and to claim that this is what she had done gave her the freedom and the power to make what at that time in my career was the largest ask that I had ever made, of a $3.5 million gift to create a tribute to her mom. And she claimed the gift and named the gift in honor of her mother, but claimed it for herself. A really beautiful example of someone coming into their own philanthropy, but through a relationship, a partnership, and a sense of trust. So that word cultivation, I totally share Carol's sensibility that's like, why are we using all of these sort of terms that put people at an arm's length from what is truly a relationship? We that are in the nonprofit space, we that are working for agencies that are benefiting women and girls, we live and breathe this, we love this, we do this for a reason. And it is not the only reason that we do it is to come over and say, hey, help me do my job. It is to say, let us do this work together. Let us have the privilege of doing this work together and making the change together. And embracing our donors with that kind of reality and taking their passion and adding it to our own is where the power is in this work. And I feel it every day, whether a donor is writing a check for $50 or $500,000 or $1 million is not the point. The point is that we are indeed pushing toward mutual goals that are going to mutually benefit this society of ours in the longest and strongest possible ways. So it is very exciting. That part is very exciting to be in partnership with. The last thing I want to say is about timing, and to reinforce that just like relationships, you shouldn't necessarily jump into into snappy relationships in your personal life. So too, on both sides of the equation of a donor and an organization, a fast relationship is not necessarily ever the successful one. So this ain't speed dating. It's a long process of getting to know one another, getting to know the values your donor has, their aspirations and their goals for the world, and determining together whether your organization fits those, and if not, as Carol so graciously said, introducing them to another organization that might fulfill those goals and dreams. So as long as we're in the same space of unlocking resources for women and girls and allowing each other the privilege of doing that work, it takes whatever time it takes for a relationship to mature into trust, mutual respect, and the ability that we can believe together that we can get something done. A year is not at all uncommon, and sometimes more for a true leadership gift, a gift of that level. What do we need to know research-wise behind the lines? Obviously, it's important to know what your donor's giving history is, to have the relationship to know what their key values and desires are. It's also important to know who they know and who influences their decisions and understandings. and whether any of those people are part of your family as well. And finally, I think that the reality for all of us is that it is never a question of when we want the gift. It is a question of, is the relationship, is the partnership of sufficient value that a gift is warranted. And when we have the privilege of that moment, it is a very wonderful moment indeed. Maybe we go to questions now?
Yes, I'd love to open it to Q&A. Roz, you put that so eloquently and in such a nice, concise way, so thank you for that. I wanted to open up to questions from everyone. There's a couple questions that have been submitted so far, so I'm going to go ahead and ask those to our presenters, and as questions come up, please ask. So the first one that I received, this might be for you, Roz, or for both of you, but the question is, do you have experience cultivating donors who are men? If so, what are the major differences between men and women donors?
I'd be happy to start, and then Carol could jump in as well. Yes, we do indeed have lots of experience in cultivating male donors, and from the Women's Foundation perspective, you might think that that was like someone got drug along and that the woman led the guy into the conversation. But in a number of cases, it has been the opposite. When men truly understand the importance of advancing women in our society and in our world, they are as passionate as women in seeking to fund it. What is interesting is that men will make a deal a lot faster. It's kind of like, I'm in or I'm not in. And men do not necessarily have to be directly involved in the organization in the same way that Carol indicated, and is very absolutely critically true. The Lilly Family Institute studies show it year over year that, women will make their philanthropic choices wishing for and seeking an involvement in the enterprise that they're supporting or advancing, and wanting to feel close to the difference that is being made. Where with many of our men donors, they want to see the impact, they want to see the thing we're driving toward, they want to see how close we are to goal, and then they'll decide if they're in or they're out. Carol, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't have as much experience as you in this one, but my impression is they also tend to be perhaps more interested in the measuring and perhaps the sort of, okay, so what exactly is going to happen as a result of this? And I think, and obviously there are many women that are also interested in that, but I know for myself, I'm more pulled by the story and wanting to know who are the people that are involved and how is this having an impact. And yes, I think that there are perhaps different ways of looking at how we make a difference.
Perfect.
So one other question that I received is, what's your biggest piece of advice to fundraising staff? What's the one thing that you'd share?
It's different from what we've already said.
Maybe the one last takeaway that you'd share.
I'm going to go back to, remember this is a person you're dealing with, and sort of the old golden rule, treat them as you would like to be treated, and make sure that you understand that that you need to listen as well as talk, and that you really need to be curious about how this person wants to make a difference and respond to that, because as you know, that we are all different, and noticing that and noticing what it is that is really driving that person. It's like the story that Roz told about the woman who wanted to make it in her mother's memory. Well, we all have different kinds of things that we respond to, and knowing what that is important, and it doesn't happen overnight.
I guess I'll go back and kind of repeat a little bit as well, that I think that the chief stumbling block for fundraisers is to think of their work as transactional. And when everything is being driven with that little red thermometer, that's like, okay, we got this far to go, that far to go, that far to go, you can get a little caught up in the fact that, okay, sold that one, boom, I'm going on to the next one. And that's part of the motivation and part of the mentality of people who wake up every day and say, I'm going to go raise a gazillion dollars for this cause I believe in. But if you get too far down that transactional road, you're losing the heart of the whole reality, which is you don't want a donor for today, you want a donor for life. And you want to have the relationship of the organization and the donor be dominant, not your relationship personally with the donor. You're like a vessel that is translating the beautiful thing you do every day at this organization into a powerful partnership for the donor to be able to fulfill their goals and aspirations. And if you look at it that way, it's a privilege on both sides of that coin.
Yeah, I absolutely second that, and just to say that you don't want, once the person signed their pledge form or written their check, that you go on to the next, because that comes back to you. If that person feels, in effect, oh, they really did only want me for my money, which may be true, but don't make them feel that way. Feel that they have more to offer than just a check, and that you really value their involvement beyond the check.
Great answer, Carol. Here's a follow-up question to that. And the question is, how do you get to a point with a donor where you can start to talk about the ideal gift amount?
Want me to take that? Yeah. Well, you don't go in without research, okay? And so it is the worst thing in the world is to ask someone for too little, just as it is terrible to ask someone for too much. And so the research that you do behind the scenes to understand the scope of traditionally what your donor has done, traditionally where they're giving and in what kinds of amounts, where their passions lie, all of those things develop in conversation. And then in conversation, you can also draw out the sensibility that says, if you were to make a gift of true significance, how would you want to feel? And someone may say, well, I would like to be at the top of the list when you carve it in stone, and someone else may have a completely different aspiration. But I think you can read between the actual facts that you access and the instincts that you follow as you come to learn a person, and to learn when they say, I would never buy a Bentley, I think that's too expensive a car. Whatever values statements they are making will lead you to understanding the range of the right amount. And likewise, how you scope your campaign to say, here are areas of opportunity, do any of these appeal to you? Leaving it possible for a dialogue instead of going in saying, I'm asking for X, if I don't get X, it's Carol's point about, Carol had one number in mind and the group had a completely different number because there had been no dialogue up to that moment. So I think it's knowable if you're sensitive to doing your homework and then sensitive to the dynamics of the conversation.
Yes.
Carol, I think this one's for you. Can you share some more details about the best relationship you've had with an organization? sort of going beyond what you think of as the fundamentals of thinking and listening really well, what made the relationship truly unique and precious to you?
Well, since it's my $1 million donee is the Women's Fund of Central Ohio, I have continued to be, actually, I'm going back on the board, which is a little nuts. But anyhow, I think that I have continued to be involved even when I wasn't on the board. I've been involved in their grant-making process. I have been felt as if what I have to say matters. Even if they don't agree with me, I'm heard. And of course, in this case, I got the fun of being one of the founders. So we got to talk about what's really important to us, and all these really fabulous, juicy discussions about who we are in the community and how do we put that out there. So I'm not sure you could replicate that easily with an existing organization, but I think having a chance to have a deeper discussion about the value of that organization and what its meaning is in the community that goes beyond we do X program and those kinds of things, or the statistics, that's what's really important to me. The thing at Smith, which I'm not involved in, is the Steinem Institute, which I'm really excited about. They are talking about both documenting activists and past history of women's activism and training activists to go out and be more effective. And I love stuff like that. So it's something that is hitting a core of my being that is at a deeper level than just we do this program that hits these many people. Is that clear?
Yeah, that's great, Carol. Thank you. So we have time for one last question. And our attendee would like to know if you could provide more examples of how you as a donor have been engaged, or from the foundation side, how you've engaged your high net worth donors. Just providing specifics here.
I'll give one, and Carol referenced it earlier. One of the, I think, secret sauce elements for us has been the provision of philanthropy workshops, philanthropy education that have no ask associated with them. They're strictly an opportunity for donors of equal resources and interests to gather in a safe, intimate environment and learn together ways to empower their own philanthropy. And we've engaged with some marvelous consultants who have provided that kind of facilitation, and it has created an environment and I mean, in many ways, I can just point to the facts, which is in our prior campaign, which prior to Rosalind, in our prior campaign at Dallas Women's Foundation, philanthropy education had been attended and valued by 25 of our 27 Women Moving Millions. And that is fairly compelling. And since then, we have added, I think, 4 or 5 more, all of whom have attended philanthropy workshops with us.
Yeah. And that's fabulous. I wish we had that. I think it's important that every touch point not be something where you're asking for money. that you have programs that stimulate your thinking and get you leave more knowledgeable than when you walked in. And as I said, I love juicy conversations and about, I don't know, the meaning of life, whatever. But it really involving me. I'm fortunate in that I was chair of the grants committee, and then when I went off the board, we have a wonderful grants process that reaches into the community, and I've been able to continue to be involved in that, which again is stimulating about why you would give money to this one over that one, and it's a way, again, to be involved without somebody asking me for money. And I think that's really important. So that your connections do not just revolve around the annual fund.
That's a really nice way to wrap up, Carol. Thank you, Carol, and to Roz very much for sharing your insight. I learned a lot, and I hope that any donors or fundraising staff who are joining us today have at least a few takeaways to walk away with today. So with that, I want to finish up and thank you all for attending. I will be sending out a recording of this webinar so you can listen again or maybe share with others on your team who weren't able to join today. So again, thank you to Women Moving Millions for collaborating for this partnership or for this webinar, and to Courtney for showing up today, for joining me in person. And we hope to see you all soon.
Thanks.